the for joining office hours and with Richard Clark on how to use the care of Salesforce org when you can't see what's changing. Very, very important topic for sure, because if anyone here, which I'm sure we all do know, Salesforce is constantly changing. Sometimes we can't even keep up with the terminology. So great. So as far as office hours, I always like to do this for, especially for the new people here. Just kind of explain what is office hours, why does it exist, why did I start this? So office hours is basically I created this in response to the troubling reality that data breaches in the ecosystem, especially in 2025, were continuing to increase, and too many organizations were losing their sensitive data. They didn't have access to the resources to help them know what they could be doing to prevent that. And these sessions are designed to help you change that. So each session is focusing on bringing expert in, like Richard here, and I'm talking about Salesforce security best practices and giving you clear and actionable steps you can take to strengthen your data security and make changes today, not tomorrow. So the number one goal is take something with you here. That's kind of that is actually our number 4 rule of engagement, is take notes and walk away with something actionable. And it's an open forum. So if you have a question that you want to ask, and just raise your hand, or if we're not talking, feel free to just ask the question. At the end, we'll have Q&A. So it's not just about this topic, it's about any topic Salesforce security related. This is your forum for that. So just be respectful to others, and like I said, don't interrupt, and just normal, basic etiquette there. So about me, my name is Matt Meyers. I'm a Salesforce CTA and CEO and founder of EzProtect, and I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem for about 19 years or so, and I'm the author of the best-selling book, Securing Salesforce Digital Experiences. And really, as you can see, my mission in life is to really help get the word out about security in the Salesforce ecosystem, which is a highly underrepresented topic, bringing in experts here like Richard. Richard, if you want to give your background, be great. Thanks.
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Matt. Yep. So I'm now down to, I think, 14 times Salesforce certified, as I think I've had 4 Salesforce certifications retired so far. So I'm not looking to increase that. And I've been a speaker at Dreamforce like Matt as well in the past. And I've spent 35 years overall in technology, but as part of that, it's been about, again, 19 years in the Salesforce ecosystem. We've also had roles at several ISVs. I've done project delivery of Salesforce. I've been that admin. I've been that architect. I've been that developer even. And some of the things I've seen within that, like at Proval, was seeing people not knowing what to test in Salesforce, or only focusing on the functional testing and not security testing, for example, not having baked in a DevOps pipeline that actually guarantees what's in your production is what you tested in your sandbox. And I've also worked at elements.cloud, so the documentation, OAuth, metadata dependency management platform, again, about helping people discover and find those issues. So we're going to talk about that today. And I've also been a co-organizer of the London Developer and the Sussex User Group community groups. I was there doing that over 8 years, but I'm pleased to say that's not for me anymore. And those of you that are community group leaders, keep doing a great job, and try and avoid burnout.
Agreed. Thank you so much, Richard. That's an excellent intro there. And I think you have a few more years under the belt in technology than me, but I'm getting there. All right. Just always like to just call this out because Office Hours is supported by EzProtect, and so we offer real-time file scanning and URL protection in Salesforce, and just trying to help people understand how to keep their data safe in Salesforce. So if you have any questions, feel free. You can always reach out to us, whether it's just file related or if you just have any kind of general security issues that you want to work through. Sometimes we don't even charge you for it. So just if you're interested, click the QR code there. All right, so we always like to do the recap of what was last office hours. So is your Salesforce team vibe coding securely? And so that was unfortunately I missed that session myself, but I heard it was a really great session about what you should be thinking about and doing while vibe coding. Actually, I read a thing the other day that somebody is vibe coded the implementation actually got breached. So just be careful as you're doing your vibe coding. I mean, AI coding isn't completely foolproof. So you need to make sure that you are doing your due diligence and just treat it like a human project. If you're doing AI, any kind of AI coding, do the same controls that you would do. Otherwise, you could end up like that person who got their vibe coded app breached. So if I'm going to pop into Richard there, your session here, how do you secure a Salesforce org when you can't see what's changing? And so I'll drive for you, Richard, as I always do, and all of our attendees, and just let me know if we need to change slides. So the floor is
Okay,
yours.
thank you very much. So hi again, everyone. So yeah, things I want to really focus on today is DevOps isn't a tool. It isn't something you buy. It's something you do. Okay, and it's really about moving changes safely from an environment once you've finished, once your development complete, when your story is done, to production in a safe way, in a consistent way, in a repeatable way. That's the key with good DevOps. And there's a website, Dora.dev, owned by Google, which looks into this across the technology ecosystem. It's not about Salesforce only. And if you think you know DevOps and you don't look at Dora.dev, look again. And it's about measuring productivity. It's about measuring quality of delivery. So do look at that. Now, for those of you that are still using change sets, no blame here. There's a reason for some of that might be. It might be you don't have the technology to invest in your own DevOps deployment pipeline. It might be that you don't have the money to purchase one of the tools that are available. What we're trying to convince you of today is that it matters, and it matters from a governance, it matters from a risk to your business point of view. It's not just about I can't afford it to do it right. You can't afford to not do it right. And as Matt said, we're seeing examples come up, and we're going to look at some of those things today. And without that process, you don't really have a single source of truth of what was tested or what was correct. You also don't have any architecture decision records. You don't know what decisions were made to maybe expand your security footprint. Maybe you made a decision that, okay, we'll have a custom system administrator because X, Y, Z. So if your only system of record is the org itself, you're in big trouble. Okay. And we'll look at also how that security can actually be overwritten in when you do deploy things as well. And when we look in this session, well, I think I'm going to do about another 15, 20 minutes, and then we'll go to questions. Every security control in the session depends on having those foundations in place first. So let's move on to the next slide. What is DevOps? So many people, when they see DevOps, they see this infinity strip. And what I find very amusing is most people, especially in the Salesforce ecosystem, only focus on that left-hand side. How do I build code and test something and release it into production? And they stop there. They forget there's this whole piece around operation. Ticketing is someone else's problem. Okay. Now, DevOps works when you bring together development and operations. That's the clues in the name. So if you're not monitoring what's happening in your production org, if you're not doing health checks on your org, if you're not, if you're saying, oh, ops have escalated a ticket to me again, something's broken, or we've got a security issue, then you're not doing DevOps. You need that shared responsibility across Dev and Ops to be doing DevOps. They are your issues, not the Ops team's issues when things go wrong. Equally, we see people thinking DevOps is about buying a tool and automating that deployment pipeline. And that is a part of it. That's part of CI/CD, but it's not the full part of DevOps. Um, People go into production and make changes. Unfortunately, there are still some things where you have to do that in Salesforce. And some of those things are incredibly important. In fact, I think Matt, you'd agree, some of the security settings, I don't know if you can even deploy them across environments without
Mhm.
someone going and clicking
Yeah,
a
there's some like that. I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just thinking as well, one of the things that most people think of DevOps is just releasing your code into Salesforce or doing releases. But and I'm sure you'll be talking about this and how DevOps is so much more than that. And there's so
bit.
many, but that's just like that's just a small part of it, really.
Exactly. So people think, oh, I can just make a quick change. And one that I've seen many times is let's change the role hierarchy. And people make that change in production because what's the point of doing it in a sandbox? What's that going to prove? Unfortunately, all those carefully crafted sharing rules, all that org-wide defaults, they matter. Okay. All the criteria-based sharing rules based on data, they matter. And if you start making those sorts of changes only in production, you haven't tested it and you don't know what you're exposing. And you've got no governance on what you've changed either. So you don't know what broke because no one knows what you changed.
Yep, exactly.
Let's move on. So how does that configuration debt accumulate? So if you think about all the things you can do, and it's more complex than ever. We used to just have profiles. Those profiles have permissions, and you could kind of get away with knowing at least people with that profile. This is all they could do. It was quite a simple way, and we ran into a problem in the past of then that lack of independence and the struggle of, well, Bob is not quite just a sales ops, he's also got some account executive responsibilities. So I'll clone that profile and I'll add a couple more bits to it. And lots of things like that came up. And we had this problem of people having hundreds of profiles in a Salesforce org, and that causes a massive maintenance overhead. It causes a huge problem in understanding who can see what, where, why, and when. So permission sets were introduced to tackle that problem. And then we realized that we had people with hundreds of individual permissions. So permission set groups came in as well. And unfortunately, people are still using the same mechanisms. They're still cloning profiles, permission sets, permission set groups, because it's perceived less risk or faster to do so. But when you do that, you're reintroducing that problem that we had with profiles. You're then having to audit hundreds and hundreds of these permission set combinations. You're effectively creating a unique set of permissions for every user of your org if you do this badly. And I think, how would you ever assess? How would you do a risk assessment around that?
Yep. And I think there's tools for letting you know what's in your permissions, your profiles and permission sets, because I think you're right. It's unwieldy the number of permissions that are in there. It's so easy to miss something and then so easy to click the wrong thing. I mean, I found out the other day, which I didn't even realize this, if you do modify all data or view all data on the permission set, and I don't know if it always did this, but it actually sets the permissions on every object itself. But
Yeah,
then if you uncheck it, it does not unset all the permissions on the objects. And then if you
that's
uncheck one object's settings, but not the rest, then it unchecks it in system permissions. Yet, you technically still have view all data, just one object doesn't have it, but it looks like now from system permissions, you don't.
yeah, and that's a great point. And I've seen that especially with the vendors I've worked at, Elements and Provar, where you've got integration profiles and need things like modify metadata. Modify metadata then ticks things like modify all data, which does exactly what you say. You go, well, no, 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 I didn't want that. I just want to be able to view the metadata. There's no view metadata permission. So over permissioning becomes a
Yeah.
regular problem.
And how do you remove all that once it happens? I'll accidentally click view all data, modify data for my whole profile. At that point, you better just create a new profile and start over.
That would be the smart thing to do, but I don't think anyone does that.
Yeah. Anyway,
That's
sorry.
simple to migrate users over. And that configuration debt is not just technical debt. It's actually affecting that security. It's opening up that threat vector. And the longer your org's running without an understanding of that baseline, the harder it becomes to understand what was intentional and what's happened by that, configuration by accident. Like I clicked the checkbox, oops, that's not what I meant. I unchecked it, but I didn't uncheck those other 20 checkboxes that got checked at the same time. Let's click on to the next slide. So we just talked about this access paths. So if you think when someone's an attacker, if we think, for example, of a customer, we've seen quite a lot of these issue. Uh, Attacker conducts a phishing campaign external to the Salesforce organization. There's some very public things, Jaguar Land Rover, other places. It could be Salesforce, it could be any system. And they convince someone to give them credentials. They convince someone to give them a OAuth token. There are various things they could do to get access. Once they're inside, they will and they can target those admins. So they don't want to target someone with view only access. They don't really want to target someone who can use a Salesforce Experience Cloud and just change one profile. They want to go for the person that is an admin on that org because that gives them that modifiable data, that gives them that ability to change permissions, to even create configurations for them. And then they can do various things. They could generate reports. They could extract your data from your org. They could update data in your org using things like data loader as well. And if you don't, or delete data, if you don't have backups, and even if you do have backups, you're going to have some loss of data, or at least they'll not have that data available to your business until you can restore that data. So there's a risk of data leak, there's a risk of data change, and of course, there's all the governance risks that go into that as well. So in terms of those access paths, sysadmin and things like sysadmin, when you have your own custom set sysadmins and permissions, uh, integrations that are incorrectly scoped because it was easy to do at the time, are one of those overlooked entry points. And of course, when you have an integration user using sysadmin profile, you probably have a key or some security token stored somewhere or a refresh token stored somewhere. It's actually probably more insecure than someone having a username password on a post-it note on their screen because someone's put it on a server in a log file somewhere and maybe not encrypted it at rest. Lots of issues there. Now, there are enterprise security tools from Salesforce which can help with this, but they are paid extras. You don't by default get them out the box. You don't get Shield out the box. Security centers are paid extra. You get a health check, and that is it. You can run health check out the box. And I've got to say, how many times have I run health check in the last 6 months? Well, I don't own any Salesforce orgs. So that's my excuse. I'm not an admin on any Salesforce
Yeah.
orgs.
And health checks is good, just a good start anyway. It's definitely not even close to encompassing, as we all know. And then also the nice thing I've seen too is how there is the lightweight shield that they are starting to offer for free, but it's it runs out I think it only has like 24 hours retention or something like that, and has very limited
Yeah.
functionality. But at least it's better than nothing.
That's a good point. I forgot about the free 24 hours version of Shield, which I can't help feeling is just the reason to try and make people upsell to the
Yeah,
real.
probably.
And the defenders, if you just focus on the perimeter security, that's not enough because once someone's in that front door that we talked about, they can do a lot of damage. So you have to protect against the access paths as people move through. And if you don't know why it exists, you can't defend against it.
Yep.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. So what a configuration baseline actually gives you. So if you take a snapshot of your metadata, and I say there's lots of tools you can do it with, things like elements.cloud can do it, Hubble, whatever Sonar is now called. I never remember what they changed the name to. There's various tools out there that can help with this. A lot of the DevOps vendors also have a way of doing that metadata baseline and monitoring and telling you when something changes. But once you've assessed and done that security assessment and you know something's good, you don't have to keep reviewing everything. You only really need to look at the diff. You only really need to look at the changes that have happened. And you shouldn't look at those changes going into production. You want to actually look at them in those sandboxes as well. If you think about your pipeline of changes, maybe working in a dev sandbox or Scratch org, pushing changes into a system integration test environment, start looking there. Don't wait until you've gone to production. Once they're in system integration test, probably you're packaging, hopefully, or release controlling that into maybe a UAT environment. Again, don't forget that UAT environment may contain real business data that may contain production, a copy of production if it's a UAT or staging. So again, before it gets there, you want to check that you're not exposing your data through a sandbox as well. But once you've got that baseline, the instant response, sorry, without that baseline, if something happens, maybe someone's got access to your staging sandbox, you've at least got a record of what was changed. You know what was changed that's given that access, which opened things up, or why the attack vector was increased and why that was done. And as we say on here, it's not about doing it once. This should be part of that release process. Every release, you should be verifying the non-functionals around things like security. You should be checking what changes were made to the security as well as functional changes and why they were made, and getting someone to review them, ideally. Anything to add on that, Matt?
No, not, nope.
Cool. Just doing a time check.
Yep.
If we move to the next slide.
Right.
And so there's something else called environment drift. So when environments change, situations can accidentally replicate into another environment, or changes can not be deployed. So let's say I make a change in my dev sandbox, it gets into my integration test environment, and it all seems great. I've checked security in there, it's fine. But maybe I manually deployed that. Maybe I pushed the changes, or maybe I used a SFDX to do a deployment, or CLI to do a deployment of that. Um, when I release that in UAT, I might not run the same checks again. And the things that I've changed may not get into that environment. Or, as we said, the problem with Salesforce often is those environments are not restricted. You cannot, other than Apex code, you can't really stop people changing things in production, which is quite terrifying. I think there's some ideas open to stop people, and maybe even a flag came in spring 26 to stop people changing certain of the AI setup in production to be able to switch it off the agent force for setup. I hope so, because that is going to cause all sorts of problems. As you said at the start, AI doesn't make it infallible, it makes it as fallible as a human doing the same job. And if you can detect that drift, if you can understand that things are changing and you understand where they're changing, and you understand whether those changes should apply to the other environment, then you could do something about it. And when I talk about those changes, I don't just mean metadata. Let's take an example that you've got a custom setting or a custom metadata type holding a API endpoint, or you're still using connected apps, the URL it's connecting to. So maybe in production, it's pointing to a production ERP system. I refresh my sandbox. I then go into that sandbox. I do not change that production URL to a staging one. I have an environment drift. Okay. So sometimes you want differences in your environments, and you need to know what those differences need to be. I'm assuming no one actually puts those URLs into their code, but I know that's not true because at Elements we've detected that before. So again, be careful. You have to understand environments may exist in code, it may exist in data, it may exist in metadata as well. And when you push those changes automatically, and say Salesforce has a dependency model, especially for metadata, that may mean changes that were not supposed to go into production can go in production. You're going to have to you're going to have to rectify that. So if you do automated continuous checks in your pipeline, if you know every change, this is what we're deploying, and you check that what changed was what we meant to change, you will have that knowledge, you will have that baseline of what actually changed as well. And if something changes in production, again, make sure you've got something monitoring, syncing, and doing a back compare or a back port to the other systems as well.
Yep. Yeah, and actually, Richard, that's one of the things that I even didn't think about until recently as well, when I started really diving into DevOps tools. Is just, I was in that same thing of, they're just for deploying stuff forward, but also they're very, very powerful to see what has changed in your production org, and being able to catch that as like an auditing perspective. So someone added a custom field. And actually, I'm going to address the question we have right now. It's like, well, sort of. So, someone changed a custom field in your production environment, or added a custom field, or added a pick list, and sometimes you can't stop that, and then you can't. I mean, because there's no triggers and things for that kind of stuff. But you can know immediately or very soon. It happens depending on the frequency. If you're having that DevOps tool that's constantly scanning your org for changes, just like you would scan code for security issues. As soon as that happens, you see check it doesn't, that's not what existed in the repo. So that creates an alert, and that kicks off a process in your organization. Maybe it was an internal, your admin that changed it, or maybe it was an attacker who's in your system and you don't know about it, and they're making changes.
Yeah, good point. And that could also be taking off field encryption or something else, or changing
Yeah,
your encryption keys. That would be a disaster. He won't be able to read
yeah,
your.
exactly. That's another session we'll be doing, is how you could get a ransomware attack in Salesforce with Shield. So
Ah, Good stuff. I know some people, Salesforce thought it wasn't possible, and then we explained it to them in a workshop in January how we would go about it, and
Yeah.
like all the color drained from their face when we explained what we could do about it. Okay, if we go to the next slide, just in the interest of time. So change records answer three questions for every incident. So what changed, who changed it, and when? If you can answer that, you have a change record. If you don't know one of those three questions or the answers to those three questions, if you can't answer them, then you do not have a change record. You just have a log. Okay. And by having that, you avoid spending 48 hours trying to work out what happened. So the first 48 hours after an incident, if you don't have a change log, you're basically reverse engineering, trying to go back, do a comparison. What's changed? What's changed? What's changed? What's changed? You're not actually doing anything about the problem or the threat. You're basically open, or you have to shut the doors on your Salesforce org, limit IP address, lock out the users, suspend all users, freeze users until you can understand the problem. So the sooner you can understand what went wrong, the sooner you can do something about it. And that change tracking, it satisfies those audit requirements for your compliance team. It can accelerate that root cause analysis, but it also protects admins from unfair blame. So people think, oh, the admin must have done that. Well, actually, no, we installed a package that did this, or whoever installed that package was following the instructions from the vendor, which basically said provide access to everything, full control access on the OAuth settings, for example. So by having that, you understand who did it, where did it happen, etc. And if you don't have a traceable record for every change to production, you need it before it goes to be deployed, not after. So it's great to have it after, but as I said, you should have that before you even do that deployment into production. You should have it from
Yeah.
testing on a staging sandbox.
Yeah, and I think that's something I want to comment on as well. So I think that the key to good DevOps and just good quality in general is complete traceability from start to end. And there's the things that people don't really think about that they just think about they're going through the motions. Okay, I'm creating my requirements, my stories. I'm going to now create my designs. I'm now going to build that. We're going to do a code review. We're going to do the testing. But what they're not thinking about is this feels like they once they went through that step, they moved on. You know, everything you do in the entire thing should go back to everything you've already done before, right? So if you're looking at your designs, your designs should look at your stories. So did those designs conform to what those stories were or not? And then you're doing the code review. Did the code review meet those designs? Does it meet the stories? Does it meet the success criteria? You're testing all the way back as well. So everything you're doing, your UAT, your user, does that meet the business requirements all the way back? So everything should have that full traceability and be thinking about all the way back to the end. Every field step of the way should be looking back to everything you've done so far, perhaps in what you've defined. And if anything's off, and then that's really your quality control of that. And you have these tools, but you also need to have actual processes in place for that control as well. And that's why all this stuff exists. So I think that helps protect. A lot of people think it's just, oh, well, we might get a bug in the system, but also that you might get a security bug in the system. And people don't think about that as well.
Yeah. And this is what I loved about Elements when I was there, was that not only do you have that automatic logging of every change of the metadata, who date did it, when did it happen, exact date times, but they encourage you to be proactive, encourage you to link that to a user story. So you actually know, if I need to roll something back, what business impact is there? What feature or functionality am I also going to have to roll back? Not just I make another change that's uncontrolled and we don't know what we broke or we don't know what we changed. We just know we fixed the security issue. And I think, just to sort of recap, there's a shared responsibility model with Salesforce. They have a platform that's very secure, that you're never getting access to. You're not going to walk in the front door. You're not going to attack. It's very hard to hack. They do all the stuff around DDoS attacks and everything else. They've got a strong way of multi-tenanting their customers, of testing that, disaster recovery. Great, brilliant. But it's your responsibility to use the configurables, multi-factor authentications, IP allow listing, following least privilege, which we didn't really dive into, but is a key part. So that principle least privilege, don't just do zero trust if you're in public sector. Everyone should be following a zero trust model.
Yes.
Auditing that information and doing those health checks. Those are things you don't have to pay extra to do. Those are things that everyone can do to their org today. like moving to the new ways of connecting apps. And if you need those Salesforce Shield to platform encryption, if you need data masking, if you need security center, backup, restore, archiving, we didn't talk about archiving your data so that actually you're not keeping data longer than you need to. Again, it's something you need to think about. If you're doing those things, need those things, there are products to do that, either from Salesforce or from third-party vendors as well to secure content.
Yep, correct. So you actually reminded me of my one of my favorite quotes, and we both know who him, Steve Simpson, when CTA, I say super trainer, a lot of amazing things. But he said the one thing that really stuck with me was that Salesforce is a super secure platform until the day you start configuring it. And I think that's the thing you stick in your head, that are you going to be configuring it incorrectly, or are you going to be configure it correctly? So it's really up to you. Yes, things could be more clear in there, but still you click the button. So it's your responsibility to ensure you know what that button does when you click it, and you know what other people are doing when they click that button. So that's kind of just the biggest thing I could say. So anyway, all right, great. So let I would say, like, actually I wanted to ask one thing for Richard as well. Like, you have had some amazing topics, amazing things here that you've been talking about. People, if you could bring three things for people to take away with them today, what would that be?
Running those health checks regularly, it should be part of the daily routine, if not daily, weekly, but actually the more often the better. Making sure everyone understands it's their responsibility. So it's the developer's responsibility, not the admins. It's whoever's making the change responsibility to consider security, to understand the impact of that, not to just go for what's easy. Oh, let's do modify all, it's easy. Let's forget the with sharing keyword because I won't have to test it, or it's easier to write a unit test. It's everyone's responsibility to do that stuff. And the third one is be nice to each other. So it's not about blame. It's a shared responsibility. We all make mistakes. We all need people to watch our back. It's not the AI's fault. It vibe coded a bad solution, no more than it's Bob Smith's or whoever's in the team's responsibility. It's your collective responsibility to check it before it goes to production, and when it goes wrong, to work together to fix it.
Yep. Yep. And it was excellent points there. And I'm sure there's tons more. We just don't have time for today. So we're going to move on to one of my other favorite slides here. It's Astor and Cody. Only you can prevent and contain data breaches in Salesforce, which is very true. And I love the analogy there. So upcoming sessions you don't want to miss. And so look, next one we're going to be having here is with Jesse, and what does secure custom portal architecture look like when Salesforce is your data source? Very interesting topic for sure. So and so we always like to give these slides here. So just some resources you can look into. Securing Salesforce Digital Experiences, my book. If you want to grab a copy of that, all proceeds go to good causes. More security resources that we have available, and of course, all of your Salesforce Security past office hours videos as well. So with that, Richard, I think we'll go ahead and flip over to Q&A. I think there's been one I see here, but also the mic can be now open for everyone if you want to directly ask Richard any questions. And so I stopped sharing here so we can give Richard the floor and kind of go from there. I think the first question I see here is, how would you recommend controlling a user from changing field level security for specific fields? Or how would you prevent people from deploying all fields that have a specific data classification?
Gosh, long questions are really hard to answer verbally. So let's break that down. How would you prevent a user? Well, you wouldn't give people the access to modify application to start with, customize application. That's the first thing, is you need to limit who can get into setup and make those customizations. If that's you need to fix that first. I think that's the first part of that. So let's say you've limited it as an admin. What's the second part of that?
Let me see. Pull that question back up. I missed it there. Oh, it says, second part is, how would you prevent people from deploying all fields that have a specific data classification?
Okay, so in Salesforce, you have the ability to set data classifications. It's a weak way of complying with GDPR, if you like. Um, how would you stop someone deploying? Well, I don't know why you'd want to stop people deploying it, because you're not deploying data, the data classification itself. All you're deploying is change. So let's say someone had changed the data classification from sensitive to public. it it's not really a massive, it's not good because you're actually changing your data classification, but it doesn't make things visible or not visible. However, if we change the permissions, if we change the permissions of who can read write to a field, that has an impact. And actually, when you make that change, when you tick those boxes, yeah, if you want to stop it, I don't know of a way of doing that. You just need to look at it before it gets to production of what's in that release packet, what's in that change set, what's in that DevOps pipeline, whatever, DevOps Center, I forgot what they call it in DevOps Center, one of their tickets.
But yeah, change management. Yeah, so Dan, does that help answer your question, or do you want to expand on that? I know you have the really good questions all the time. Take silence as a yes. All right. Right. Does anybody else have any questions that you would like to ask Richard before we wrap up?
Before we go, I just want to do a shout out. Before this call, I found out a legend in the Salesforce ecosystem, certainly in the UK, who was at Salesforce, Pat Patterson, passed away last weekend.
Ooh,
Those of you that know Pat, I mean, he taught me about Salesforce security. He taught me about building apps on the Salesforce platform. He worked for Salesforce. He went into salesforce.org before that was folded back into the mothership. He was hugely influential on a lot of people, and just taking me meant to think about Pat and his family. It's a huge loss. Whether he's still involved in Salesforce or not, I don't know. But he was a fantastic guy, and he was hugely influential.
yeah, thank you for that. All right, great. So, it doesn't, I don't see any more questions coming through at this point. So I guess unless everyone has a last minute question, we can go ahead and just wrap up for it. So again, thank you so much, Richard, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join and communicating some of this important information on DevOps and DevOps security, which a lot of people don't think about. So, but anyway, thanks everyone for joining, and I guess we'll see you next week or a couple weeks.